In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. I just really want to thank our speakers and the work and preparations that they've done to give us this very much needed talk, obviously. People aren't motivated to do anything. But I know there's a lot of people who can't drive at night or can't see well or whatever, so they're watching us online. So I just want to quick welcome from left to right, Julie Gerges, Sadie Sobhi, Michelle Henvey, and Jamie Lopez. They each will talk to us. I want to encourage you to ask questions, discuss, talk, whatever is applicable to your life so that we can all benefit. And we'll go from there. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. And whoever will be asking questions, please use the mic so everybody can hear the question, and also those on the watching online, streaming online. I'll put a mic on this side and a mic on this side.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jaime Lopez. I teach for the University of Maryland in the biotech program. By training, I am an epidemiologist. I have 2 graduates degree in public health. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit information. Hopefully you'll find it useful to understanding COVID, the basics, and also I'm going to be followed by a small group of expert panelists that's going to explain different topics related to the pandemic. So what is exactly a virus? No one really knows the origin or how they emerged. They're not really classified as living things, forms of life. There's no historical pattern or any type of evidence how they evolved. When examining some of the fossil records of plants and animal cells, they're thought to be parts, bits of nucleic acids that are picked up by different sources through the evolutionary period. They don't really have a body per se. They're parasitic in nature, so they're not really considered alive. They don't have like an external membrane that surrounds their cells, okay? They don't have internal organs or organelles, so they don't really function on their own. It's when they are introduced into a host, either an animal, even some fungi, bacteria. They infect the host and then they replicate. Now what I tell my students is replication is kind of like making a Xerox copy of yourself. Okay, so they replicate within a host cell. And so they do infect all forms of organisms living and growing inside. So this is a classification here. Okay, there's 4 main types: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. The most common that we're hearing about right now is the coronavirus 2, the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19. There's a total of 7 different viruses that are being studied that are known to infect humans. Next slide. So this is what a virus does in your body. So it attaches itself to a living cell. And in the case of COVID-19, it is it lines the respiratory tract, the respiratory epithelia. And so that's how it's taken inside. You have to breathe it in. Certain types of other pathogens like tuberculosis, I think Ebola is maybe another one. What it does, once it gets into the cell, it starts manufacturing its own proteins and actually kind of hijacks the cell. And it uses its own DNA, its own genome to actually manufacture and replicate itself within the cell. So what happens over the course of time, or actually hours, because it really happens really quickly, it escapes the cells, okay? Basically it's exhaled, okay? And that's how the transmission occurs. Also, there's a specific receptor within the respiratory tissues that actually allow it to infect the respiratory tract of the individual. Next slide. So these are some of the symptoms. When I came down with my infection, I did have a mild cough afterwards. I had a small elevated fever. I did not experience any shortness of breath, thank goodness. I did experience a sore throat. So you can come down with some more serious symptoms, a high fever, a productive cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle, body aches, which I think I did have. I didn't have a headache, some loss in taste, smell, also a sore throat, congestion, a runny nose, typical influenza symptoms. So in looking at all these symptoms, you want to be careful, especially with those people who are increased in age, okay, and or possess or are experiencing comorbidities. Now, what I mean by comorbidities is it could be a chronic inflammatory or chronic disease, such as diabetes, lung disease, okay, that really increase your chances of coming down with severe pneumonia, walking pneumonia. Most children have mild to no symptoms. The asthmatic children seem to be more at risk, more complications. We have to be careful of the children that they don't develop a high fever from COVID, okay? And anyone having difficulty of breathing from this type of infection should be treated immediately. So this is an epidemiological curve. This is from the City Department of Health here in Austin, Texas. So these are the waves. Now, I can't really point to them, can I? So, no, it's okay. Anyways, each spike here is the number of cases increasing. So each peak here is a wave. Now the last peak, Omicron, if you look and if you listen to the news, they say Omicron was a lot more infectious. So that peak is obviously increased. The color coding on this graph basically refers to a stage categorization, the recommended stages. And go ahead to the next slide. This is a risk-based chart that they also publish, okay? So as far as your activities like travel, dining, shopping, they're all categorized, okay, by stage. And these are the recommended activities that are recommended, okay? So stage 5, which I think we're still in, I think we're stage 5, I didn't look today. Yeah, you want to avoid any traveling. If you're dining out, maybe order prior to your arrival and take it home and eat. Shopping, of course, you want to minimize that. So these are just basically guidelines that minimize the transmission of the virus. Next slide. This is a cumulative incidence of infection since the beginning of the pandemic. So you want to look, actually the chart here is not very, it's poorly done, but anyways, let me see if I can explain it to you. The purple are the running total, the number of people that have been infected, okay? Down below you see a yellow and red line, those are the hospitalizations, and the red is actually death. So compared to somebody who's been infected, there's a very, very low probability of dying from this. This is just a time series analysis. This is matching the peaks. This is for what hospital administrators use to kind of plan ahead to expect when the next pandemic or outbreak occurs. So the blue lines, the peaks, are actually the cases of COVID. Down below, the orange are ICU bed admissions, and the gray line below the ventilators usage. Yes. So this is a GIS map. This is by zip code. So you have a map of, let's say, Austin, broken down by zip code. And the area here, I think, is a little bit larger. But the dark areas by zip code are the hot spots. Okay, and this tells policymakers, hospital administrators, how all the the healthcare services are spread out. Okay, so you want to keep people that potentially have other type of illnesses away from these dark areas. Thanks.
Next question. Mike.
So,
Can we wait till the end? We'll go back.
Yeah, we can have.
It's okay. I think my time's almost up. So these are just available treatments, just to let you know. Go ahead. And prevention. Prevention is key. Okay, so you want to be aware to always see your provider, have a sense of awareness, get on social media. There's tons of information that I see all the time. You may want to consider also getting the booster. This last slide just gives you a comparison of COVID and influenza. COVID is a lot more infectious, but as far as mortality, it probably is somewhat increased. I think we don't know a lot about that just yet. Once we get the data, we'll do some analysis and start comparing. So just to wrap up, it is something that we should be concerned about. Okay, it's something that everyone should be afraid. It's preventable, and also the treatments are coming up around the corner.
Do you want to open it to questions now?
Yeah.
After each section?
Yeah, and even
Okay.
during the talk, unless you prefer not.
I think let's wait till after each section.
so we
Yes.
need to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so they have questions on that section.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So if you go back to the slide where you broke it down according to,
Zip code.
zip codes?
Yeah.
Is there anything that is significant about where it's extra dark?
Yeah, those are,
35.
the darker the color is, the more cases there are in that zip code.
I guess what I'm asking is what is in those zip codes?
Huh?
Is that where the university is? Is that where,
Unfortunately, the website on the City Department of Health website does not really have a map or a process where you could overlay the freeways and all that. I understand what you're saying, but this is by zip code.
Is that numbers or percentage? Oh, per
Numbers.
capita. Okay.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like along the line of 35, so maybe there's just more congestion, population
It's by zip
congestion
code.
there.
I would actually,
Where is this church in reference to that map?
say again?
Where's the
Where is
church?
this church in reference to that map?
That's a good question. What's our zip code?
78681.
Okay, so we would need to make or find that zip code on this map.
Where in
Well,
the
is this just Austin?
This is
maybe
Austin,
Travis?
right?
This
No,
is all
this
Austin,
Yeah.
okay?
North,
We're
this is
Williamson.
south, that's west. So it's like that lighter.
we're
blue
lighter.
Towards the left.
Keep in mind, this is my school presentation. We don't go into that detail. I have students all over the world. So this is just an example of what the public health department does with their data. And alerts the public, of course, alerts the medical centers, policymakers, emergency rooms, pharmacies, stuff like that.
I do think
Okay.
it's interesting that the east side of Austin is darker.
Which south? It is.
East.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Question before we move on. I'll see if I can get a map. I'll see if I can. I don't have access to that.
I have one, so I don't have the mic, but do you know what the mortality rate is for the flu?
That's a good question. They publish those reports, I think almost every week. The problem with that, Father, is that there's a lot of misclassification. Even some of the tests that they use to actually diagnose has a very low sensitivity and specificity. It doesn't catch the disease every time you test somebody. So I'm a little bit guarded on what I want to say in that terms until I can validate every case that is tested positive really is positive.
No, I'm talking about the flu, not COVID.
But you need a reference to it.
Oh, okay.
Because if you don't compare it, then how do you know?
Okay, different.
So that's another problem that I've encountered, at least in my community, we always do relative measures, so at least it gives meaning, so it's more deadly or less deadly than the flu.
I've asked because I noticed it's been going significantly down. When I started, it was around 3%, then 2%, and sorry. I watch the charts every day because like just for the church and stuff and for announcements, but I've noticed that when it started it was on 3% as far as what's been reported. Like I use worldometers and then it went to 2%, and now they haven't updated yet, but it's at about 0.8, of 1%. So it's thanks to Omicron, so much cases and the mortality rate is a lot less. So it's getting better, thank God. They say COVID's gonna be here to stay, kind of like the flu, where you'd have to take a seasonal booster for it. You think that's the case?
I think that's the case. I think if everybody was a little bit more conscious about their health, I mean, eating a good healthy diet that's going to increase your immune response, getting out walking, get out in the sun, that helps produce vitamin D and stuff. So it's all really, there's some people that think that it's it's a passing thing, but it's still going to be around.
Thank you.
Further, regards the question, how much is the mortality for the flu? So they said in 2018, 2019, 28,000 flu deaths. So of course, we should look to the time before COVID. Yeah, this is the CDC. In 2018, 2019, they have 29 million flu illness, 13 million related medical visits, and 28,000 flu deaths.
And in the healthcare world, the problem is they're misdiagnosing. Ever since COVID arrived, they've misdiagnosed flu, and so the numbers have severely dropped, but that's not, I don't know how accurate that really is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jamie, can I ask you a question though?
Sure.
Because I think we keep talking about death and the percentages, but there's so much data now about long-term COVID and people getting comorbidities post-COVID. Like one of the directors of our daycare is a very fit younger person. She got COVID and now she's developed type 1 diabetes. And she has to use insulin. And she's young and she's fit and she's healthy. So can you maybe?
Black American?
No, she's white.
She's white, wow.
So is there any more data about that in terms of long-term COVID?
Before anybody panics, I mean, this is something new. I think it caught everybody off. It's gonna happen again probably one more time, at least in my lifetime. But let me just put it this way. When it first hit, Father, there were like these projections, 100 million, 200 million. Well, we have surveillance systems in now. So I think this is kind of like a wake-up call, if I could say it that way, where more people are gonna pay attention to what's going on.
When did you have it? I just had my, 4 weeks ago.
Oh, no, mine was like more than that, like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
No.
Well, when he was saying going outside, so when I did have COVID, going outside helped tremendously and it helped my breathing a lot. It made some of the biggest difference just being outside, and it did help me breathe a lot better. So that was a big thing that I noticed, was a huge difference.
So there is a website called Infection Rank Organization. Okay, I bookmarked it on my iPhone, and it gives you pretty much almost a daily update. Okay, now the numbers they report are changes within the last 2 weeks from the current day. So it has my county, the Texas, so at least you'll have some idea what's going on in your community. So I could probably share that.
Any other questions? Questions? Okay, well, I'm honored to be up here. My name is Michelle Hamby, and I am an administrator, and I've been an administrator at a school. So I'm going to be talking about the educational side of how it's impacting education. We're stepping away from the public health and now we're stepping into the education. I am gonna give a little bit of background. Abouna is gonna laugh at me because my dad is the same way and I make fun of him. And Mb Yusuf, I would always tell Mb Yusuf, don't ask my dad a question, he'll start from Adam and Eve. And Abouna knows exactly what I'm talking about because my dad gave a speech and
We like to hear stories, Michelle. We love stories.
Yeah, okay. So, Abouna's gonna laugh about this like probably the whole night. But anyways, I'm gonna talk about the 5 generations coming of age pre-COVID. So, the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about was we have, in education, we do a lot of leadership summits where we have experts in the top of the field come in, and it's not necessarily, it is theoretical, but it is a little bit more practicum. Because they've been in the field, they know what's going on, they've been around students, and especially K or pre-K 3, so starting at 3 years of age to 18 to 21, if that student is still in high school by the age of 21. So, based on that, we kind of talk about the generational theories and how we need to be with students of different generations, because we've noticed that. So the leadership is, go ahead. So we're going to start with the builders, and those are the silent generation, and that's 1929 to 1945. Those are the generation where your life paradigm is be grateful you have a job. A lot of people who come from third world countries still are in silent generation. So we see a lot of that in our church, where our parents have especially taught us, be grateful you have a job here. And sometimes it is kind of like a foreigner complex of just being like, because you feel like you can be uprooted at any moment, because that's what could have happened in your home country. So your attitude towards authority is to respect them. Now, the era you were born in is the boomers, and those are the pig and the python. So you think about the pig and the python, and you think that a python is eating a pig. It's, the python's gonna die, right? Because it's going to tear up, right? So it's like, they deserve better. So this is the generation of we get what we want because we want it, right? And their attitude towards authority is replace them, because they feel like they can just replace them if they feel like they need to. It's interesting because my parents are from the boomers, and I know growing up, and I think a lot of us have connected with this, is I remember my parents saying, I want you to have a better life than I do. You can do this more. And I've noticed that in our generation, it's kind of like you have to have yourself absolutely established to get married. Not you get married and you build on top of that. So that's kind of like one of the things that our generational eras are kind of changing. So then there's the busters, and that is the Generation X. So 1965 to 1982, I am a buster. Our life paradigm is to keep it real. So, and our attitude towards authority is to endure them and just kind of deal with it, right? And and then we've got the millennials, which is our Generation Y, and they're 83 to 2000, and life is a cafeteria. Life is a cafeteria, meaning it is a la carte, you can pick what you choose, totally Mark Zuckerberg, okay? We're thinking that, right? Facebook, that type of thing. So your attitude towards authority is choose them. And that was big, especially when you think about social media and you think about how some of the presidents were elected and the influences. That's how they were choosing them. So, and then we've got the Homelanders, and this is our Generation Z. So these are our 2001 to 2018. And their life paradigm is I'm coping and hoping. And their attitude towards authority is not sure I need them. And these are changing in the times, and I did kind of want you guys to notice, we talk a lot about this. This comes from Tim Elmore, and he is someone that we follow. and he talks about generational theories. Elmore is E-L-M-O-R-E. And he talks about generational theories, and he talks a lot about Generation Z and how they are really kind of having that life paradigm of I'm coping and hoping. Social media is kind of ruling their lives. They're called the Homelanders. The reason they're called the Homelanders is because of Homeland Security. That's when it started. But now they're even more so the Homelanders because they're stuck at home and they're so isolated because of COVID and because of how it has drastically changed their lives mentally. So when you look at the generational cycles, you think, you look at the busters, or the builders, and then the boomers, and then the busters. You see caution, confidence, caution, confidence, caution. That's what you're kind of seeing when you look at them. So caution for the builders, boomers, confidence. They had a lot more confidence in establishing themselves. So you think about those, and it kind of, with us going over this and really learning more about this in a school setting, it helped us understand our students, but it also helps us learn to build a rapport with them. And when I talk about this is very general terms. We're not, labeling them, this is definite, but this is very general terms of what we see. So shifts that Generation Z brings is our, confidence is morphing into caution. Idealism is morphing into pragmatism. Spending money is morphing into saving money. And it's interesting because if you think about the millennials, it's the spending. Now you're looking at Generation Z and it's turning into saving. Attacking an education is morphing into hacking one. Consuming media is morphing into creating media. Viral posts are morphing into vanishing ones. Text messages are morphing into iconic messages, hashtag.
Right.
Anticipation is morphing into anxiety. And a big song that they talk about is, I was told when I get older all my fears would shrink, but now I'm insecure and I care what people think. So, how to lead Generation Z. So these are kind of the pointers of what we need to do to gain the rapport with them. Is trust must be earned, relationship must be established, respect must be earned, and incentive must be cultivated. Do the why before the what. You have to explain to them the why before the what. And we were raised as, you do the what, don't worry about the why. Now you have to do the why. So ownership must be given. What do you think you must do is making them accountable. And hope must be offered. So now this is kind of the slide of education post-COVID, and it's a lot of information. And what we're looking at this year, so as assistant principals, we get together once a month and we kind of talk about the things that we're seeing across the board. And when I say, I'm at a charter school, so the level of incidences are less than probably a big district school that's about 3,000 students. But this is what we're seeing across the board. So an increase in racial and cultural presumptions in the inability to effectively problem solve their emotions in social settings. And when I say this, I say, if someone says you're Black, the other student says, oh, you're racist. They don't really understand the cultural thing or the cultural issues that we're facing as adults. They don't, so it's like if you say, oh, to a student, you're Black, they're like, oh, you're racist. No, you're defining something that they are. And so it then escalates into something else. And those are kind of the situations that we see. They don't really fully understand what we have experienced through our lives. And sometimes I kind of connect it to my parents, coming from Egypt because of what they faced there as being a Christian. But yet I see my parents very close and familial to many, many Muslims. So how do I create that in my mind? Does that kind of make sense? So it's kind of like a generalized thing where it's like we have to be kind of careful with this. We have to be really careful, especially when we talk to our children about it. An increase in vaping with marijuana among high schoolers as well as middle schoolers. This has been really big. So there are a lot of vape pens that we find. More vandalism to property in terms of there's really no, there's a lack of kind of, you know, if I do this, it's not a big deal. So a high need physical interaction among peers while making sexual jokes and noises. That's been a big one, and that's been starting in grade 4. High need for mental health support in schools, which we've been very short-handed, and increase in pornography on YouTube and other social media websites, and the pornography starting at 3rd grade. Increase in hacking social media platforms to hide inappropriate activity. Discord, those are great, perfect examples. Discord is an application where you can set up private groups, you can chat with people you've never met before, you can video chat them, you can do a lot of things on there. And those are things that we've had to investigate. Increase in physical altercations, a dissolution of formal social structures with a lack of social skills towards peers and authority figures. And a lot of students look at me and say, "Hey, bra." I'm like, "I'm not your bra." Like, no. They talk to me like I'm a friend. I'm not. They forgot that. They've been on their bed for 18 months doing absolutely nothing and on the internet. Educational, clinical perspective, the last 18 months currently, we are in survival mode. So, education, so these are the possible solutions. Parent academies, bringing awareness to the big issues. Social media and screen time activities, setting up limits. There are a lot of amazing things that you can do with your iPhone or your Android to set up limits on a phone for a family account. Vaping, talking to parents about what vaping can do. Cultural and social awareness issues, really discussing the root causes of certain things and bringing awareness and trying to be objective instead of subjective when you're explaining it to them. How the brain works. So having students actually understand how their brain works when they have outbursts. And these are some things that I go over with my teachers a lot when we discuss how they're receiving and processing information. Student-centered exercises, using mistakes made as teaching opportunities. Student daily check-ins, restorative circles with follow-ups. So we do a lot of restorative justice at school, and we do a lot of restorative circles. And teaching students how and why their brain works the way that they do. And then some calming techniques to help our Generation Z students stay engaged is drinking 8 to 12 ounces of water. You won't believe how many students majority of them are dehydrated. They're dehydrated completely, and that's why a lot of times they can't even function in a classroom. Developing a future story for them, or helping them actually imagine what their future story would look like, and even if that means like creating a mosaic for that, and working with them on that. So what do you want your house to look like? What do you want your job to look like? What do you want these things in your life to look like? And then whenever you see someone who is frustration or losing their temper, you ask them to look up, and your brain stops and you stop talking. And then breathing techniques. So, does anybody have any questions?
Oh my goodness. I think Missy, and then Missy had one up earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on the slide, that identifies all the different generations. Can you go back to that one?
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, the first one.
Yes.
I thought it was very interesting that Generation Z is categorized as coping and hoping, because I don't see a lot of hoping. There's, and minimal coping.
Well, remember, so these 5 generations coming of age was pre-COVID.
Okay.
So when we were presented this information, it was pre-COVID.
So pre-COVID, okay. I heard you say things like, we need to give them not a reason, but like.
A why instead of the what?
No, the why I'm fine with.
Oh.
The helping them to visualize what their future would be like.
Oh, okay.
So that they could actually think past this immediate.
That social media moment that may bring down their day for
Yes.
like a week.
Yes.
Yes.
So, do you think that, because of COVID, of course, they had so much extra social media than they maybe wouldn't have had otherwise, right? Because presumably, they wouldn't have been on social, they wouldn't have been on social media while they're in school. That because they weren't in school, then now they have so much social media. Do you think that that has, I wanna say sabotage them, in terms of their being able to what do you call it when you can
When you what?
not instant gratification, when you can,
Delay
yes.
gratification?
Is that connected? The ability to delay gratification, is their impulse control connected with their lack of hope and their lack of being able to see beyond, like, this section, this?
Beyond like what's happening in that moment. So you said really quick, their social media was not during COVID or during COVID?
No, I'm saying that because the social media has increased so much during COVID,
Yes.
do you think that that is what's causing,
Impulse
their
control.
immaturity? Like their
Well, whenever I kind of think about my students, I always think of that movie, and this is probably a bad example, but you may have seen it, Ready Player One. Have you seen Ready Player One? Well, it's what the world would look like in the future of people living in virtual reality. And how the society itself is completely dissolved, and it's horrible living conditions, and everybody's living in virtual reality. And so sometimes, I've seen a lot in schools. I actually had a student who thought they were living a video game, like their life was a video game. But and it was really sad. And this was pre-COVID, so imagine. But I think about that the social media piece is so prevalent in their lives, and they've been exposed to so much, and it does something to their brain. It's it's giving them a big, huge dopamine dump, and they need that, and it's causing so many issues. Like, you can get a student to do just about anything if you're like, I'll give you screen time. And that's so sad, because they'd rather choose screen time than go outside. But when you have the kiddos and you have to limit that, and we've limited it so much this year, like we're preventing them from being on the screen as much as possible. We're just kind of removing it. But I think parents also, us as parents, we're just like, oh, this is an easy babysitter. And they think certain things are okay because other kids are doing it, like Fortnite. It's not an appropriate thing for kids to be on. Absolutely not. Anything that has shooting, first player shooting, it is not appropriate for a kid to be on. And I've got my kinder kids on it. And so they actually believe that, and they don't know how to socialize. So they would socialize on the computer or meeting people and so on and so forth, but they can't socialize in person. So those are opportunities that we work with our kids on, of learning how to socialize. And we're so short-handed. We don't have enough mental health specialists in schools, because who's gonna work at a school when they can go do their own private practice and get, double the pay? You have to have a passion. You have to have a passion to want to be with those kids. I hope I answered that in a way. Okay.
I think there was a couple more questions. Joe,
Questions?
I think, and,
You have questions?
I think Joe and Jackie had questions.
Oh, I don't need a mic, I'm pretty loud.
Okay, so.
Can you move forward in the right here. Nope, that's
Is it the next one?
next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Right here. So what did you mean when you were talking about restorative circles and restorative justice?
So we are trained in restorative circles, and we've got 3 different restorative circles that we do at school. So there's a green circle, a yellow circle, and a red circle. And so the green circle is community building. So those are kind of like classroom circles. And we talk about either our day, or we talk about things that we like or we share. And so we start off with a talking piece, and whoever has a talking piece gets to talk. Whoever doesn't have it gets to listen, and everybody takes turns. There are a few rules to the circle, but we got this training through the state, and human beings were tribal people. And the minute and they started doing restorative justice in prisons, because the minute you isolate somebody and you walk them away and they don't feel like they have a purpose, then that's when they continue to follow that path. And so being in a low socioeconomic school setting that I am, and I do Title I, so we are a Title I funded campus, and 60% of our students are low income, or families are low income. We want to be very mindful of the school to prison pipeline. So we do a lot of restorative, that if someone did something bad, we talk about those in the yellow circles. And so we do something called beefs and bouquets. And when we do a beef and bouquet is, if I have a beef with someone, it's that time to say the beef in the circle as a community, and give, number one, be heard and validated, and then talk, and then allow the student who did the beef to apologize. And then if I didn't have a beef, I could say a bouquet, and a bouquet is something nice to say to that person that has nothing to do with their appearance. Like, I really like how Sally opened the door for me or handed me the microphone. It meant a lot to me. So we teach the students from kindergarten restorative circles on how to share, how to acknowledge, and how to apologize. Those are kind of like the big things. And so if we give them these opportunities, we don't want them to be the outcast or be that bad kid, because nobody's bad. You just make some bad decisions sometimes.
So
And
are you seeing, by doing these type of activities, are you seeing improvement in their behaviors? Or
extreme. So before I did the training, and I did the training 3 years ago, before I did the training, I had a lot of stay away contracts, and how am I gonna enforce that? You know, when I say a stay away contract or a no contact contract, meaning a parent calls up and says, I don't want my kid around this other kid because this kid hit my kid, and I'm gonna go to the police and I'm gonna report them. And I was like, oh, you can do whatever you wanna do. They're not gonna do anything, but you can still do it. And whenever I would do that, the next minute, the kids would be outside playing together. And they're supposed to stay away from each other. So how am I physically able to enforce this rule? No, never. So we do these circles because, and every parent's been on board with it. I haven't had an issue, and I've had like a 99% success rate. and our referrals have went down about 70% in terms of pre-K through 5 over the last 4 years, and this is like, it's our bread and butter of our campus. Now we don't have any bullying cases, we don't have any of the things. I used to get parent emails probably like twice a day. I don't get parent emails but maybe once a month now. Like, and it would just be one. And it would be an issue that wasn't reported to us, we just didn't know about, and then we're like, oh, okay, well, let's handle it. Let's take care of it. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. Because we do teach the kids, because there are a lot of shy kids, and we do teach them. If you can't come to us, then you've got to go to your parent. And if your parent comes and tells us, then you are doing the right thing, because we need to know, and if we don't know, we can't help you. But the red circle is more of an isolated circle, and that's when it has like 2 or 3 parties involved, and it became an escalated issue, and it's something that we have to repair, and it wouldn't be done in a classroom setting. Does that help?
Yep.
Do you do? Sorry.
Last question, I didn't see it covered in your slides, but from an educational perspective, how are you guys dealing with the whole, I don't know what to call it, gender identity issues?
So I do have students who are non-binary. It's non-binary, right? Non-binary. Yes, I do have students who are non-binary. I also have parents who are transitioning. And I am very mindful of it, and I'm very mindful of the pronouns, but I also try to steer away from pronouns completely and call them by their name in every situation. And unless their name changes, I'll call them by that name. We don't really have like, I completely respect it, and we have, our campus is actually very multicultural, because I never viewed Austin as very diverse. I viewed it as a very eclectic city, and I've been here for 21 years, but not a diverse city. And I'm super grateful at the elementary school that I'm at, because we have, our students are composed of 90 different countries and 30 different languages. So we've got a lot, and we do have a lot of refugees. So we have a lot of refugees who come over.
Just a quick follow-up, the restorative circles exercises, do you know if the campuses with the older grades do that as well, middle and high school?
Yes.
And it's
And I do actually go over and train them, yeah.
Okay, and then it's also producing?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Because, well, when you're doing like a red circle and you're working on an intense situation, you're not only being heard, and a lot of times, a lot of truth comes out in circles, and it's not just one person's fault, right? It takes 2 sometimes. And I've seen in about 95% of the cases, it's usually 2, like, well, they said this, or it may give the person who did something wrong to them an opportunity to be like, share something really private that they may have not been able to share that happened to them, and this is why they did it, right? So we kind of look at those situations, but based on the circles, like especially a red circle, big issues, we create boundaries as part of the meeting, and that's the closing of the meeting. And we talk about if these boundaries aren't followed, these will be the next steps.
Can I ask a follow-up question to these restorative circles? These restorative circles sound like amazing, because they allow people an opportunity to grow, right, from past their mistake, but they also seem to give connection where the kids weren't having connection, and honest communication like you're talking about, to allow truth to be there and to actually engage in it, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So then my question is, it seems like that would mitigate a lot of these other things that the kids are going to. So why do you think it isn't? Is it because they got attached to these things like vaping or the porn, or the gaming
Well,
or that stuff
right.
prior?
Well, I think that if you're watching pornography at such a young age, it does something to your brain. And that's like a medical thing. Like you need to reprogram it. That's a big thing that you would have to change. So that's why we practice it in kindergarten, and we start our restorative circles, and we start them with community circles, because you want to build your community classrooms. And so once you've built that up, then we can start talking about some of the issues that happen throughout the day. And a lot of teachers are super thankful for it because it resolves the issues before the kids go home. So the kids are not talking about what has happened. They're talking about the good and the bad. They're not talking about all the bad. Because the next thing you know, the parent's gonna call you the next day and say, da, 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 da. That's why we don't get those calls anymore. And the teachers love it because it kind of gets them out of the limelight and allows them to teach and focus on the teaching instead of an angry parent. So, because the brain does remember more bad than good. So we're always going to focus on the bad because we're always in survival mode of how we can protect ourselves. So we have to change that mindset. Any questions? Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, you have a question? Yes.
So I'm thinking about all that you said, and just a couple of things come to mind. First, with the changes in our society, I wanted to know if you've heard, because this is what I'm hearing from the social sciences, is that where our world, our society, especially in Western civilization, is that we're moving from a mass society to more of a digital society, more of we're connecting more. There's different ways, but that intimate touch or meeting with somebody. I've never signed up for online confession before, but because of the COVID, of course, it's a workaround. But I've noticed that because I come from an immigrant family myself, and so, when I was growing up, I'm so old that I still remember getting in the car, going with my dad down to the drugstore, and in the drugstore, there was a machine where you pull out your TV tubes, and you go and you test them, and then down below there was tubes that you pull out, and then you buy it and go back and fix your TV. That's how old I am. But it's changed so much, and I'm wondering about the kids. Do they have two sets or a set of parents, a mother and a father, or two individuals, two people to help? Because it's for one person to raise a child, especially in this day and age, it's very difficult, it's very expensive. There's a lot more threats to child development. But anyways, that's my comments.
Is that the question? Sure. More digital? Well, I think we are digital, right? But I think COVID just kind of like put the nail in the coffin because, we're like 6 feet away from each other. We can't touch anybody. Our kids like going to a restaurant, like, don't touch anybody. Freaking out, right?
Licking the wall.
Yeah. And the windows. And windows.
Yes. So we're training them to not touch or have contact with anybody. So it's just so interesting, and it's really funny because when I got COVID, everybody takes like 10 steps away from me. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you really feel kind of, isolated, but I think it's the digital plus the COVID. It kind of just reinforced everything, and I'm hoping that with what you're saying in regards to it being, it's here to stay, but it being something like the flu, I'm hoping we're starting to move in the right direction, because our one thing I did forget to mention is I told you guys more of the behavioral side of things in education, but academically, our data is so bad for the kids who are coming in who had this time off. There's so many kids we need to retain and repeat grades. they didn't learn anything last year, and we're seeing that the data is, and then, when I think about high school and we're just like, let's rush to graduate them. So many kids graduated that shouldn't have graduated. So many kids, finished their college classes that shouldn't have finished college classes. So I just kind of think about that, they're missing little pieces, and they even kind of fast-paced some nurses too, to get through, to get them in the door, because we were so short on nursing. So there's a lot of things, we missed some big pieces, and now we're filling in the gaps, and the state's not necessarily doing enough to help us, and it's been a struggle. So.
Any other questions? Okay, so Julie and I are in the mental health field, and so we're going to be talking more of the mental health fallout from everything that's happened in the last 2 years. And our plan is to take about 15 to 20 minutes to go through the slides. I'm just looking at the time, so if we can just keep your question in mind, but then just like maybe wait until we finish, and then we'll come back to it so we can have a more fluid conversation regarding, because I know that things are going to come up as we're talking. So we wanted just to kind of talk about the trends that we've seen in the field. And sorry, it's hard. We don't know how to.
We're going to share and piggyback on each other.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Joe. Okay. So, I mean, I don't think that these are kind of a surprise to anyone, but I do think it's important to really highlight the significance of them in terms of the increase in mental health issues that we're seeing, a huge increase in people seeking out mental health treatment, therapy, trying to get medication because of this ongoing anxiety and depression. And if you think about the last 2 years and how many losses we've had, whether they're micro losses or macro losses like loss of life, loss of freedom, loss of lifestone things, milestones like prom or graduation, having to wait on having a wedding and a ceremony. These are the kinds of life events. Even people that died, they weren't able to have funerals for them and acknowledge them and be able to celebrate their life. So there are so many losses that have occurred and traumas that have occurred in the last 2 years that I think people just kind of kept internalizing and didn't really have a way to process that in the community. And so that's kind of the fallout now, is that we're seeing this continued increase in mental health issues and increase in suicidal ideation. So that may not be that they have a plan or that they are intending to hurt themselves, but their depression has become to a point where they're really having a sense of like, maybe I would be better off dead, like I can't continue in this life like this is just too painful.
And I think it also has a kind of a ripple effect because of everything going on. If we think of even the last 2 years, we've had to pivot a lot, yes. Right? It's adjust, and that puts a lot of stress on the system, our systems, and then, if we think about the isolation while someone's experiencing these things, so it's also limiting availability of social circles where they would have talked about some of this stuff, dealt with some of this stuff. Additionally, and this may not come again as a surprise to a lot of people, the mental health system is very stressed, where even if someone wants to seek out treatment, there is a long delay, and many practitioners are having a hard time, the demand is much higher than the supply, we'll call it. And so that also prolongs getting help for anxiety, prolongs getting help for depression, same thing with suicidal thoughts. And so this is kind of what we're looking at is, this is very personal, but systemically, a lot of these things are coming up. And also it wasn't just the pandemic, there was a lot society-wise that was going on while this pandemic is going on. Okay, and then in order to cope for a lot of people, they may have increased, thank you for reminding me, they may have increased their food consumption. For a lot of people, you eat your emotions. If you're not feeling good, then, you know, and you have chips and you have the TV and you don't have, or you're working from, if you are lucky enough to work from home, you know, and the fridge is just 3 steps away from you and you're having a hard time dealing with things. There's an increase in food. There's an increase sometimes for those that struggle with disordered eating, binging and purging as well. So it just puts people more susceptible to that. And then for some people, as Sally kind of touched on earlier, especially with long haul COVID, is we're seeing some mental health conditions, you know, and of course some like long-term medical conditions that come up, and we definitely know that it's not isolated. It's, you know, medical conditions, many of them come with mental health conditions, you know. If you have diabetes or you're trying to manage your health in other ways, anxiety and depression, even if it's like a little smidge of it, a sprinkle of it, comes with medical. And so we're really looking at, you know, the long-term effects of even for some people, not for everyone. Of course, depends from person to person. Again, increased substance use, you know, especially when everything closed down, the liquor stores didn't, right? And in a way, I do agree with some of it because there are people that are dependent and it becomes life-threatening if they stop suddenly. So, again, going along with the food, there's the increase of substance use in order to cope with what's kind of going on. And that has increased. The amount of overdosing has also increased as well. You want me to keep going? Okay. Increased irritability, frustration, aggression. So I want you to even pay attention to your own reaction, right? So I think Abouna was bringing up kind of grief and loss, or was it Sally? Someone was bringing up grief and loss, and that is definitely, we have a reaction to grief and loss of opportunities, of what could have been, what our plans were, right? You know, when you ask someone now, what's your plans for the next 5 years? And they're like, I don't think I should do that, right? And so, because it's, again, constantly changing, and so that causes friction, and we can notice even within ourselves, you know, feelings of irritability. If you were in the house with your family and you're breathing the same oxygen all the time, it could be really frustrating. I mean, you still love them, but it's kind of like you're in each other's faces all the time, and you know, you're not getting either the privacy or the mixing of people, and so the stressors that come with that could also increase your irritability and frustration. And aggression. Aggression is just how it's expressed, right? So you may feel irritable, but being snappy with someone, like if you've noticed, like being around your family and it's just too much, this is kind of a result of the pandemic. And then different age groups, you know, and how this, you know, COVID-19 has affected different generations and different groups within the generations differently. So if we think about single people, they have a higher degree of isolation. They have, kind of, lack of a better way to say it, stunted ability to seek out people romantically, right? So that affects single people. I mean, it's the truth. It affects single people, and it feels like life is on pause, and that can be really frustrating. Families with children, I mean, honestly, lucky I don't have children right now. I told Sally that when I was seeing her. She was so prepared, and she's lugging around all these children. And I was like, I can't lug myself around sometimes. I don't know how you do it. And so kind of this working from home and having kids at home and trying to balance working and the kids doing their schoolwork, right? Or the kids catching COVID, and then you had these plans, you were going back out in society, and then it's like, just kidding, reverse, right? And so that could be a really big challenge. Or if you have a job where you still had to work, but your kids were at home because of school, that's tough, you know, that's a big challenge. And it's like, you almost have to pick, do I feed the kids and go to work, or do I stay home with the kids? And So very challenging for families, especially with children. And then the 24/7 togetherness, right? Sure, you picked your significant other, and then sure, you decided to have kids, but it was with, little disclaimer here, like we're gonna go to work.
Yeah, it wasn't on the job description.
Yeah,
it wasn't there. I looked.
It's such a good point. It wasn't in the family job description. We weren't supposed to be this together, right?
Other duties as a sign.
Yeah, and it's like, no, like it was in the fine print.
Right?
And so that togetherness, also, it's too much. You don't get a chance to miss them.
Right.
You want to miss them. And I don't know if you have anything to add.
What kind of missing?
Yeah, like it's an opportunity to miss them because they're always there.
Right.
So, and that's definitely where I could also understand parents like wanting a break from their kids and saying, here, take the iPad and please just go give me like half an hour or an hour. Right. I could definitely understand how that would develop, just for the parents to have a break. Yeah. Families without children are also affected. Like if it was, 2 of you all and it's still 2 of you all and it's like you're just staring at each other for months on end, you may love the person, you may have chose them, but there's no like variety in life kind of thing, and then probably the little things start getting on your nerves, even more so, it exacerbates it. Again, this is not saying that people don't love each other and families don't love each other. This is a natural thing that would happen. And then older adults. I mean, the impact that it has had on older adults, loneliness. I know kind of thinking about, especially older adults, feeling there's this, sense of feeling like I have a finite amount of time and that this limits it. I either don't get to see my children, I don't get to see my grandchildren as much. Every time there's a surge, like again, and there could be this sense of urgency, like, okay, I'm 75 years old, or I'm throwing out a number, 75 years old, you become very aware of your mortality naturally the older you get. And so just feeling like, in a sense, like it's cheated at a time.
Yes, I think it's also caused a little bit of tension because us seeing our parents and with COVID, us starting to put rules down for them. And saying, don't go out, don't do this, don't do, who has experienced this? I have experienced this. And finally my mom was like, don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna do what I wanna do. And I kind of had to make peace with that and understand that this is their life and they are towards the end of their life and they want to enjoy their life and I need to be okay with that. Especially when they want to spend time with their brothers or sisters, and so it's also interesting kind of how we quarantined in the United States. We tended to quarantine in our own homes, where a lot of other countries quarantined in a home, but they had generations in their home, and they didn't get as affected and isolated as we did, and so the mental health needs weren't as high. So it's just kind of something to think about. It's almost they embraced each other, and we kind of fragmented and separated,
Yeah. No, definitely, it changed the dynamics. I know my dad had to show me his full PPE before he went to all these.
Yes.
So it's required. So yeah, talking about how it affects, older adults, loneliness, change of that parent-child dynamic, missing out on events, those that have been widowed and having to really, grief is hard enough, but dealing with that grief, with the loneliness on top of that, that can be really intense and isolating. I think we
compounds the grief. Yeah.
Anything to add to those, Sally? Okay.
And so just kind of piggybacking onto that, just kind of like a general apathy with life. It's just once you kind of get into that mindset of just like being in your pajamas and like a day in, day out, it's like the same thing. It's hard to kind of get yourself out of that and like, okay, I'm gonna have to put on real pants now. You're gonna have to zip up, like.
And they may not zip up.
Right? Like there's all these things that people have to like reintegrate themselves into, and so it can be hard, and especially for those I know that like as a nation, people have been talking about like the COVID-15, how they've put on weight, right? And so even kind of the embarrassment of that, like, oh, they're gonna see me 2 years later and I look different, so there's all of those things that are coming into play as well that can increase that apathy and wanting to kind of stay away. And then you think about, how we've had to wear masks and we can't see someone smile anymore. There's so much nonverbal that we're missing. And that's also affected communication and how we relate to each other. And just that constant fear and worry for your family and your friends and your children and what to do and to take care of yourself. It's a lot to manage and take care of, and you think it's just gonna be like this acute period, right? And now it's just dragged and dragged and dragged. And it's like, we think we're in the clear and then boom, it happens again, right? And then we're re-traumatized. So you kind of think about that and the impact that has on us as human beings. And the helplessness and feelings of dread that can be associated with that. And I think about even like the Zoom meetings that we've had in the church, or having to watch liturgy on Zoom, when it happened in 2020, and just, it's not the same, right? That sense of community and that feeling like being in the presence of God and being with your brothers and sisters, it's completely different when you're sitting in your living room watching it on your TV or on your computer, right? So that also has had an impact on us, and just the lack of human touch and being isolated. We're really not meant to be so isolated in that. And there's actually like a study about that with the Russian orphans, and how they had like two groups where they gave one set of orphans like all that they needed, but they didn't provide them with any love or affection and touch, and the other group got love and touch, and those that did not get that became physically ill, died, had a lot more issues, didn't really survive and thrive in the way that those that received human touch and love did. So it's something really innate with us that we need as human beings.
And I think even thinking for yourselves how that's changed, like if you think about the human touch, and if you've gotten less, if you've gotten, for some people they've gone months, a year, a long time without human touch, and what that really does to the irritability, it'll go up.
So just really quickly, I wanted to pull some figures in terms of like, what does the data actually say? And so this was a study, the first one was done, and basically they're saying it's about a third of church attendance now. So, yeah.
To a third or by a third?
No, so like 27% in the Northeast have not returned to church services, and 22% within the South, post-pandemic, or, acute pandemic phase. And they've also seen depression numbers triple. So pre-pandemic, the general percentage was about 8% of the population that was diagnosed with depression, and in 2020, that number rose to 27.8%, and in 2021, the number is now 32.8%. So we've seen a huge jump. And then in terms of substance use rates, they've done several studies. So they had one study, it was 931 adults without children, parents, and adolescents, and they were surveyed about their the impact on personal behavior. 19 to 25% of adults without children reported an increase in alcohol or illicit substance use. And then in another study, 274 adults who also didn't have children or parents or adolescents living with them had been interviewed prior to the pandemic about their onset of alcohol and substance use. And when they were re-interviewed later after the pandemic onset, they had a significant increase post-pandemic from like 13% to 36%. So really big numbers in terms of just the increase in substance use consumption and alcohol consumption. And that creates its own issues because it puts you at increased risk of mental health issues associated with that. So, and marijuana, there's studies now that talk about how marijuana actually can trigger first episode of psychosis and mania. So they're seeing like a numbers now where people are having that. Typically it's, in early adulthood, 17 to 19, 20, and now we're seeing it much younger because of the increased substance use. And just you think about like the meaning in life pre and post pandemic, and they talked about how there's a reduction in people finding meaning and future planning because travel has been withheld, and talking about their spouse, it's like down I think 9%. They also talk about how, let's see, I just wanted to pull up some of the numbers. Like material well-being, and that's not like wealth, it's just feeling secure and safe and having a job and having your needs met. That's actually dropped as well. It used to be that people found security and meaning in that 29%, it's down 18%. And then just overall feeling of mental health and physical wellness, it fell from 19% in 2017 to 11% in 2021. And it's especially significant for our older adults, 65 and older, and it's down 30% for them since 2017. So we're seeing really big changes in our culture and in our society. And when another study had interviewed adults in terms of what they expect in terms of their life and how things will change, it was really split. So 51% of US adults thought that their lives will remain changed forever, whereas 45% expected a return to normalcy. So we're gonna kind of go into that, like what are these solutions? How do we deal with all of these traumas and grief and issues that we've faced over the past 2 years?
Sure.
Oh, do you want me? Oh, you can read that. Okay. So, yeah.
So now that we've talked about the doom and gloom of the impact of the pandemic, we figure we'll end it on a lighter note with, there's stuff you could do about it. So go ahead.
So I just read the Bible.
Yeah. It's a great start.
We thought this Bible verse was really powerful, related to what we're talking about. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he fails, for he has no one to help him. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone?
I'm not.
Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So I think we just see that in our society now. Okay, so we're just gonna talk about these issues.
Yeah, how about crime and safety and all these?
We can get to that. I don't know if I really have any numbers about crime and safety.
I don't think I have numbers. I think I have seen it, but it's hard to say if it's really just related to the pandemic or a lot of factors that are going on. But it looks like it's increased. Yeah.
I think there has been an increase though in domestic violence.
Yes.
From what I've read.
And I think sometimes that's hard also to tell, is because is it just now being reported because they're more together? But I think overall there is an increase again. Yeah. So again talking about solutions and how do we work past some of these things that we heard. So social skills are just that. They are skills that need to be practiced, right? And so if we're out of practice, and we've been out of practice for the last 2 years, the only way to really work through that is to practice those skills, to get out and to talk to people about it. And there are safe ways to do it, right? Like we come to church, and I think for personal opinion is we've been really lucky that we've been, Abouna supported, people wearing masks, don't come when you're sick, re-emphasizing that to make it a very safe place to come. But it's this opportunity to practice the social skills, or else, to be honest, the longer you go without socializing, you could feel more awkwardness, right? So why not practice it? risks and benefits, right? Is you could use judgment in what activities you participate in, right? So if it's a small gathering, okay, that's safer. If it's outside, it's safer. So you can still achieve the goal of socializing with other people, but it's like, hey, you wanna go meet in our backyard? That's safer. You're still able to do it. When we, after, in church, we're all masked, and then when we go outside, it's like, okay, we're outside. This is a safer place to do it. Nothing is 0%, but it's really lowering our risks without compromising other things. And then for self-care, really coming up with really small goals. As Sally mentioned, there's a strong sense of apathy as a result of the pandemic. And so the only way to work on that is, even if you don't feel like it, and a lot of us may not feel like it, maybe schnifs, I hear that a lot in Arabic, is overcoming that, doing it even if you don't feel like it in the moment, and then the reward of it will catch up. And so, using this opportunity to take care of yourself, Jamie mentioned taking care of your body, like nutritious food, sugar affects anxiety, affects your mental health, a lot of that, and so making positive food choices. Do you have anything to add to that one?
No, just, they found, like with sugar and red meat, that there's, it does impact your serotonin, and, it can cause an increase in depression. So just kind of thinking about the combination of foods that you're eating.
Outdoor activities is really important, like getting your vitamin D. And so I work for community mental health, and they also have a private practice. And one of the biggest things in private practice I'm encouraging people to do, have you been outside? Okay, your homework is go outside in the sun for 15 minutes, increase it to 20 minutes, go outside and do outdoor activities. They're very safe, like Michelle mentioned. You could breathe better, so really getting those health benefits in. Exercising, walking, stretching, do it outside. It's very safe to walk around the neighborhood. Well, most neighborhoods, I'll say. Yeah, not all, I stand corrected, most neighborhoods, okay. If not, go to a park where it's safe. Therapy and getting help, reaching out to people, finding someone to talk to, especially if it's been, depression and anxiety has been dragging on. And I also want to say, sometimes as a community, we don't talk about that a piece of depression could come with suicide thoughts, but it does exist in our community. And so being able to talk to someone about that, because for a lot of people, they may have those thoughts, but with further assessment, they may not act on it, and interventions do work, so.
What is the data if someone does have suicide thoughts and it is talked about, they're less likely to, there we go, sorry. They're less likely to do it. What is the data on that?
I don't have the statistics because I would have to look that up, but I can give from personal experience. So the place that I work now, I worked with a different team. That's all that we did. The police and EMS would call us out and we do suicide assessment. And so for a lot of folks, them talking about it relieved some of that weight, and we were able to help them with the interventions. Most people didn't end up going to the hospital. Most people just needed to be connected to help. Because whenever you're in crisis, you don't, and I'm gonna try and be really quick because I know we're short on time. Whenever we're in crisis, we get tunnel vision, so we may not be able to critically think as well. And so having the supports around help you to critically think. So I don't have the numbers per se, because I'd have to look them up, but definitely suicide is preventable, like definitely preventable.
Do you mind if I add something about your question, please? I just read this research, is very recent, and they said especially for the high school student, when the people talk about it and let them know about the mental health, it can actually do a lot of improvement, especially at this age, in the adolescent or the high school student.
I don't know the statistic, but we got trained through Boston Integral Care at our campus, all of our campuses. And we have to do initial suicide assessments on campus, and then if it gets to a point, we then call someone like Julie, and the unit comes out, and then they decide whether they want to take them in. So even if a little kid says, I want to die, whether verbally or in writing, to anyone, their friend or their teacher, we have to do an assessment. And so with media and stuff like that, they learn these very easily. Cartoons, because everything lives forever, right? And so we have to do those suicide assessments. And so the suicide assessments in schools start from the age of 5 when they, we start with the kiddos. Yeah. And it has been a huge increase this year, and I didn't even think about that.
Also a shift in thinking. So a lot of times we may not even be aware of it, but we're waiting for the pandemic to be over. Don't wait for it to be over. Is what's your new normal? Like, how are you going to adjust? How are you going to pivot? That's part of mental health, is being able to adjust to circumstances.
So we wanted to offer to you just some practical solutions. And in terms of, in this time of solitude, creating moments with God through prayer or reading, using apps. There's like the Upper Room Media, which is out of the Coptic Church in Australia. Out of the Coptic Church in Australia. And they have sermons and podcasts and praise and worship music. Like, there's all sorts of things that you can get connected to that's very helpful. And even just like listening to music, maybe, putting on 105.9 and listening to Caleb on your commute to work, and thinking about being intentional in terms of what your ears are hearing and what you're integrating into your mindset. And just the benefit and the bonus of in-person worship like that we've talked about, getting the opportunity to put on real clothes and get out and see people and make eye contact and have conversations in person. And it's a different experience when you're here in the church worshiping as a family, as a group, rather than, at home. And thinking about just identifying small steps that you can do. So thinking about, okay, maybe it's too much for me to come for the whole liturgy to start. Maybe I'm going to start by saying I'm going to attend liturgy for 1 hour. And then the next week, okay, I'm going to add 20 minutes to that. And you incrementally add time to build up that skill again, right? So we're rebuilding, we're retraining our bodies, we're retraining our minds. Even just setting small goals for increasing self-care. So maybe the idea of exercising for 30 minutes just feels like too much. So you just tell yourself, okay, I'm just going to do 10 minutes and then I quit. That's all I need to do, 10 minutes. And what research has found is once you just kind of hit that hurdle of allowing yourself that freedom to make that choice, once you feel the effects start of exercising, you want to end up continuing. So it's just kind of taking that small first step to make the change. Yeah, I think that's it. We were trying to keep it short, but it didn't happen.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
There's a question back there. Do you have the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what do you think about what I've heard called this obsession with safetyism? And especially younger generation being extremely risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
The way I see it is, nothing in life is guaranteed. Our length of time on earth is not guaranteed. And I think that our society has this idea of living forever, and this really threw a wrench in the gears, and that nothing is in our control. So just, do you have any thoughts about that? I feel like there's so much, be careful, but when are we gonna start helping people learn how to live again and know that you could be as safe as you want and then cross the street and get hit by a car, right? So is there a way of approaching that and discussing that? Because at the end of the day, we have to go on, and the world has to move forward, and we can't have people building this world if they're afraid to walk out of their house.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that risk and benefit thing, right? And for each person, it's going to be different, and really navigating how do I weigh out risk and benefit. So I think for each, for some people, they may not have someone at risk at home, and so they may be able to take a bigger risk, and they may not have any comorbidities, and they may still keep themselves safe. For other people, they have people that are immunocompromised, so the risk of it may not be as much. So I think it's really something individually, and even in discussions, like having conversations with each other to see what each person's doing kind of opens up the options, and then for each person trying to identify what is the risk and benefit, right? So, for example, when I'm alone, I'm gonna take more risks. I have someone in my family that has health conditions. When I go near them, I am very risk avert for 2 weeks before I see them because I know the risk for them is high. They may not survive it, right? And so it really depends from person to person.
So,
I don't know.
I actually kind of have like an idea in regards to that, because you're right, at some point we do have to get out, right? And we have to live our lives. And something that we did at school is we developed phone trees. And so each of us, especially when we were having, when we closed down, we needed to make sure to be able to connect with every single teacher, make sure, and so we created phone trees, and you won't believe how incredibly important a check-in is. Just checking in with someone, just making sure they're okay, having a group, and saying, hey, I just want to make sure everybody's okay. We actually pushed that out at the beginning of COVID, and within less than 3 days, we had checked every single student and made sure that they had the needs that they needed at that moment with their families. Because we are low socioeconomic, we wanted to make sure if they didn't, we made it happen. But we were also sure that our staff was okay. And so, we had this phone tree to kind of trickle down. We reached out to our staff, which I may have like 15 in my phone tree, saying, hey, this is an update. And it's personal enough because we are tribal people, we function better with groups of 35, and that's something to remember. When it gets too big, it becomes too separated, right? So I have like 15 in my group. I let them know, please check in with every single family. I'm sending out a spreadsheet. I need to make sure that you've checked in with every single family. If they haven't responded to an email, you gotta call them. If they haven't responded to a phone call, then it gets escalated to me, and I call them. And so things like that, and I think if the church maybe had a phone tree, maybe we could create a phone tree of groups, sign up for groups, however you wanna do it. Just be like, hey, just wanna make sure everybody's okay. We did it during the freeze when we were shut down for 2 weeks. We did it when these big things were happening, and we were constantly checking in with each other, which forced people to communicate. And then we also started slowly moving everyone back to campus, which was very hard, very hard. It still is very hard because we do have people with long-term COVID. And I had a teacher last year with COVID for 9 months.
Oh, wow.
And she's my age and she wears a hearing aid, now, and she's had several surgeries. But we have these things set in place, and they have been amazing. And we've been, we have a crisis communication team. So those teams or committees re-ensure things, and people just don't fall through the cracks.
I also think if you can think about it in terms of a trauma response, that can be very helpful when you think about the symptoms of PTSD, it's hypervigilance, hyperarousal. What I mean by hypervigilance is, someone that is a wounded warrior, right? So coming back from the war, they don't want to sit with their back to, in a restaurant. They want to be able to see and be able to scan, right? If they hear a car backfire, they may duck, right? Trauma response. So we as a society have been traumatized. And so this kind of reaction of safety, safety, safety is that trauma response. And so it's restructuring our brains to kind of reality test that, if you will. So we need to kind of acknowledge that there is trauma there, and as a society we are responding to that, as a family system we're responding to that. And so we may be more on alert in times where the safety is okay, but we're so skewed, our conceptualization of it is skewed. So it's thinking about that and being able to just have conversations with people, like Julie said, kind of testing out like what their thought process is and maybe offering a different perspective. Thinking about like what is the safety risk here on a scale of 1 to 10. Is it a 1? Is it a 10? What makes it that in your mind? What would make it less? What would make it closer to a 1? So kind of having those conversations to recenter people's perception, I think, is very helpful.
And there's also a lot of, so we do this a lot and it works with adults, cognitive behavior therapy. You want to have replacement thoughts, like when a certain thought comes into your head, you want to have these replacement exercises. And there are some wonderful exercises for you to do to kind of think about how to restructure your brain, because your brain can build new neural pathways. And so it can help, and those are things that we do, especially with our students. We teach them how their brain works in kindergarten, like what our amygdala does, what our cerebellum does, what our cerebrum does, so that they can start identifying parts of their brain and how things function the way they do. So some of those things, because once you understand that, then you can start restructuring how you view things. And so a lot of times, like when I'm talking to students and, the whole world is falling down, is this a big problem or is this a little problem? But it's amazing how these little conversations you have with these young kids work amazingly with adults. It's really interesting.
Okay, it's Abouna's turn.
Yeah, let's turn it over.
I think there's a couple more questions, Mariam, so do you want to do
Yeah, can we wait after
Pause
Abouna?
and-
Maybe you will answer their question. Like after Abouna cover his points.
All right. I can't thank you guys enough. This was so enlightening, so educational, just wonderful. Okay, so really after everything's been said, there's very little that I would like to add to it. I had a bunch of points. I want to try to just mention each one in a quick minute so that we can just kind of grab that. We'll try to post the video so people can go back and catch more of the stuff or refresh the memory. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to have here is basically, okay, now that we know all the stuff, okay, what to do moving forward? How can I improve things a little bit? Number one, instead of just focusing on the bad and the negative and the disasters and all the stuff that's going on, just as a simple step, think of all the diseases that have now been annihilated. Think of all, like for example, like we saw a commercial, like for AIDS now you can just take a pill. Do you remember, if you're my age, if you remember back in the 80s when AIDS came out, it was a death sentence. It's terrifying. And now it's take a pill. Hep C, hepatitis C, and it was very, very common in Egypt, and now they do some 3-week treatment, and it's gone. It's cured. It's not just treated or reduced or stopped, it's completely gone. So basically think, okay, this may have been bad, may have been so new, unknown, or whatever. For sure, this isn't at all as big as these, diseases that I've just mentioned, so for sure it's gonna get taken care of sooner or later. It's just a matter of when. And we're talking about the percentages after the vaccines and the boosters and whatnot. It's tremendous. Huge effect, Maybe it doesn't protect you so much from the infection, it still does, maybe after weeks or months later, it's like 50%, but it definitely protects you a lot from hospitalization, death and stuff. Number 2 is Philippians 4, 8, and 9. Philippians 4, 8, and 9. Write this down, memorize it, practice it. I don't have it exactly in order, but as soon as I say it, you recognize it because I talked about it before. It says whatever is good, whatever is noble, whatever is lovely, if there's anything praiseworthy, if there's any virtue, meditate on such things. St. Paul says, do like me, the things like I do, and the God of peace will fill your heart. Okay, there's negative stuff around us, there's diseases, there's deaths, there's whatever, but there's also a ton of good stuff. There's, the glass has this much water in it, I can focus on this, on that, and the interesting thing is whether I focus on this or that, it doesn't change what's happening, it doesn't change the facts. It just changes how my state of heart walking away from the situation. Somebody cuts me off, I can go, oh, this person is a jerk, they think they own the road, no, but they don't care, they're so selfish, whatever, and my blood pressure just went up a little bit, or my heart rate or whatever. Or I can think, oh, maybe they have a problem, that they need to go see somebody, maybe they got a bad phone call. One of the college students told me, her mom wouldn't teach him to drive, and said, tell yourself, maybe they really have to go to the bathroom. So what happened, the person cut me off and they've moved on. It doesn't change the fact, it doesn't change life, it just changes what's in here. So you'd be really doing yourself a favor if you do this, what God teaches us. And this 4, 8, and 9, like I wrote it down here during the talk, I said, know it, believe it, because it's a promise from God's word. Live it yourself, model it, and then teach it to the kids. Like with the examples that I was talking about. Be very careful being cynical around kids and all negative around kids. Kids are walking video recorders. They record everything. You may think they're not paying attention, they may be playing, but they hear everything, they see everything, and it affects them, even if we don't talk to them. And adults too, really. Another one, the solution for all of this, and I'm not just saying this because I'm Abouna, is the church. The solution is the church. You want love, you'll find it in the church. You want serving, you'll find it in the church. You want taking care of the less fortunate, you'll find it in the church. You want enlightenment and life-altering discussions, you'll find it in the church if we're doing things right. You want positivity and hope, you'll find it in the church. You want acceptance, you'll find it in the church. You want healing, you'll find it in the church.
Interacting.
We're seeking facades and mirages like from all kinds of fake, phony sources out in the world that don't do the job. And if a person really just tries it out and does this on a regular basis, consistently, they will seek all this stuff. I remember people were in tears when we closed the church back in mid-March 2020 until May of 2020. Like, they were like a kid lost in downtown, like we can't see them. They were freaking out because they could really feel it was hard on all of us, really. Yes, this point here, first and foremost, one of the things you can really see the wisdom and the guidance and the blessing of the Holy Spirit in guiding our church fathers and the synods of the churches, the economy of the church, and how they designed for us to live a Christian life. First and foremost, connect with your father of confession. Father of confession is so many things. It's not just, yes, he's the person who prays the absolution and your sins are removed from you. But your father of confession is somebody that you can confide in, somebody you can vent to, can have a catharsis with, somebody who talks with hundreds of people and gains experience what's good, what does not good, what works, what doesn't help, etc. Can share that with you. Almost like a coach and a life cheerleader and like a bunch of stuff all on one. So take advantage of that. You don't need to go through this alone. Also, don't believe everything you hear. Many use what's going on right now for their own political agenda, or for their own political advantage, for financial advantage. There's a ton of false information out there. And if it is important enough, you're gonna hear everybody talking about it, and eventually it will make its way to you in your lap. You don't even have to seek it. So just don't go out seeking that stuff, and don't be like believing and sharing every email and every post that comes your way as if it's true, and basically spreading it just like we spread the virus and worse. Share with you a couple of verses. Proverbs 14:15. That's easy to remember. Proverbs 14:15. It says, "The naive believes everything, but the sensible person considers the steps." Considers. Think about it. Also, Proverbs 18:13. It says, "One who gives an answer before he hears," meaning before he knows the facts, "it is foolishness and a shame to him." And boy, do we do that before we verify facts. And it's understandable. There's a lot of lying and exaggeration and sensationalism out there. Yeah, this is something I try to encourage people, and I'm sure Julie and Sally can add to this too. A lot of times what I've noticed that people do just from talking with people over the years is that when I get a fearful thought, a scary thought, the thought begins, and then I do this. And I sit there and maybe I distract myself a little bit, and then it comes again and begins, and then I get to do this. And we're stuck in this infinite loop. And this might sound like it's counterintuitive, but I tell people, okay, let's go together through the scary thought when we're talking. Let's take it to its end. Keep telling yourself, okay, and then what? You know, think of a fearful thought. Give me one. Anything you might see.
Roaches.
Is that no,
That's my first thing.
Okay, what will happen? You know, roaches might increase in my house. Okay, then what? Call a little pest control company.
Leave the house.
Burn the whole
Get cats.
Get cats, yeah, that's easier.
You know, let's say, you know, prices are increasing, you know, with the inflation or whatever. Okay, then what? Then it'd be hard to find whatever key. Okay, you know, and then keep following that thought, and you'll find that there are solutions. If you are actually happen to be, God forbid, at the end of that line, there are solutions. I'll deliver pizzas. I'll eat beans and rice. You know, God said He takes care of the birds and the flowers, so He's going to take care of me. So take the thought to its end. This one's obvious, but like trying to keep your eyes on God. When you're angry, when you're scared, when you're upset, the key to stability when everything around you is changing is to focus on what does not change. The key to stability when everything around you is changing is to focus on what does not change. The key to peace when there's so much unknown around you is to focus on what is known. Just the example of, you know, St. Peter when he was in the storm, the storm didn't change, but because he kept his eyes on God, he was able to walk on that, the waves and the wind and the storm that was so scary. And as soon as he took his eyes off God, I look at what I can do, what I can handle, what's going to happen, this, what about this person, what about that person. None of us are reliable or don't change or stable permanently and absolutely. So I don't want to start to freak out, and it's going to affect all my state, my mental state, the irritability, the frustration, the aggression, and all that stuff. One book I wanted to just suggest to you is called The Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results by James Clear. This is the book here. It talks about how to take little steps and how to really have a huge effect in your life, but little steps at a time. We talk about this stuff all the time. The 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. Start with small beginnings. Start by identifying what bad habits have I acquired over the last couple of years. Make a list of those, make a tally of those, and they'll go, okay, which one am I going to start targeting? Which one am I going to start working on? And don't worry about all the other ones for now. You know how the church fathers teach us how, like, sin comes with cousins, comes holding hands. You know, like, for example, gluttony comes with lust and laziness and other stuff, and vice versa, and anger. But also virtues, as I acquire them, every time you're trying to get rid of a bad one, you're automatically building a good one. They also come with their cousins as well. And you'll find that when you work on a little bit, a lot gets better without just as a byproduct. Please.
I was also thinking, I was also thinking that something that we can do with the kids is really having them understand that there's a difference between habits and character traits. Because a lot of times when we have a habit, it doesn't define who we are. So, for example, smoking. You catch your child smoking or something like that, and then they just view themselves as a bad person. We have to understand the difference of that's something that you can change, and it doesn't define you, and we need to change that habit. And that's like a huge thing, because, especially young kids, they don't understand, they just understand bad and good. And we have to have them know, like, it's the easiest example. They don't brush their teeth in the morning. And then some kids are like, oh, well, their parents can say, oh, well, you're bad because you didn't brush your teeth in the morning. No, you just have to build that habit in them of brushing their teeth in the morning. Yeah. And that doesn't define who they are.
Yes, absolutely. I loved when you were talking about the restorative circles, how you encourage the kids to compliment an action that this person did. Like sometimes in the parenting stuff, I tell the people, don't tell your kids, oh, you're a good boy because they did something, or you're a good girl because they did something, because the implicit meaning is this, is that when you don't do this thing, you're not a good boy or a good girl anymore. So when you compliment them, talk, when you did this, when this person did that, and how you handled this, whatever, that was like great. I love how you went and shared the last cookie with this person, or it's the action. See, that was very kind of you. This was very generous of you. So just the action. So when I don't do it, all it means it's not good, but it just means I didn't do that action, but I'm still me. So that's a very, very good point. Thank you. Continuing with that, like SMART goals, SMART. What does it stand for? Small, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time specific, something like that. So those things work. They've been studied and researched. We can apply this in our spiritual life too. If don't say, okay, I need to get out of this COVID madness. Okay, starting tomorrow, I'm gonna pray more. What is this? Like, okay, you said tomorrow. Okay, that's the beginning. But what does that mean? You're gonna pray all 7 Agbe hours. You're gonna pray 150 Psalms. You're gonna do 200 prostrations. You're gonna start journaling. You're gonna no. Say from the beginning of March till the end of March, I'm going to pray whatever from the first hour of the Agbe for 5 minutes. I'll pray 1 Psalm and the conclusion, like something that you can measure and keep. Give yourself, SMART goals. Tell you something funny real quick. One time I was reading in Proverbs and it's like, the wise, the fool, the wise, the fool, the wise, the fool. And then I hit a verse that said, honey is good, but if you eat too much, you vomit. It's like, what is this doing here? Like, is this a typo? Like, where did this come from? And I looked it up, and the church fathers tells that honey is all the spiritual practice, all the stuff that the church teaches you to do. Prayer, Bible, liturgies, confession, communion, fasting, prostration, sermons, readings, journaling, all this stuff. It's good, but if you do too much of it, you vomit. It's like the crash diets. It's like the get-rich-quick schemes. I'm gonna juice for the next, 2-3 months. And like a few days later, you crash and burn, and on top of this, it's like, I'm a failure, there's no use, what am I gonna do? This is never gonna change, so. And that's one more benefit of the Father Confessions. I'm gonna do this. Many times I tell people, whoa.
Yeah.
No. So, let's do this for a month, make it a habit, and when it's done, we can add a little bit more. The church fathers at McGregor taught us this. They see a little bit with consistency is way better than a lot without consistency. Y'all mentioned this, I'm not going to dwell much on it, but a balanced life. You must be surprised to hear this in the church. But life is not all, work and school and church and service. No, there needs to be rest. There needs to be physical exercise. Don't look at me. There needs to be entertainment or you know, like doing fun stuff. There needs to be some sort of hobby or something that, you know, balance life. Accountability partners. This is something that is very rare in our church and kind of foreign, kind of new, but God willing will increase this, is that you pick somebody and be very picky in choosing who your accountability partner will be, okay? This does not necessarily have to be somebody who's like more spiritual than you. It's just somebody to go the journey with you. It doesn't have to be your spouse. It can be like a best friend. It can be, you know, someone else that you think, and then you like check on each other, you make a plan together, you like share verses that you read in the day with each other, just somebody to go through life with you. We talked about taking breaks. They even teach you this in teaching, which is don't be continuously working, continuously doing stuff, take breaks, and reward yourself. Say, like, sometimes people now, they're in the habit of being at home all the time, they like sit, so they binge watch stuff or whatever. Say, okay, I'm going to work for 2 hours and then I'll watch a half-hour show or something like that. After I work, then I will do this. You'll find that you'll be a lot more productive. You have something to look forward to, and you actually have that break as well, and it adds to the benefits. This is mentioned, the divide and conquer. Don't look at the entire project. Just ask yourself, okay, what is the first step in this project? And I will do this, and then I'll deal with the next step when I get there. And then lastly, no, 2 more points real quick. Be kind to yourself. This is very tough for us cops. Be kind to yourself. If you mess up, okay. If you miss something, if you had a bad day, okay. You can either, it's kind of like the driver who cut you off thing. You can either beat yourself down or tell yourself there's no use or like it won't work, or you can tell yourself, okay, now is a new opportunity to do something good. What's done is done. Okay. This morning, it's a new page. I can focus on what I can do today. I tell people a lot of times we live in a lot of regret and shame on the past that we cannot change, or a lot of worry, anxiety, and fear on tomorrow, which we don't even know if will come or not, and we forget to live the day and enjoy today and do the best we can do today. The last thing is serve. We have a saying in Egypt that says, "اللي يشوف هم غيره ينسى هم." Means when you see other people's troubles, you forget your trouble. Again, the wisdom and the profoundness of God telling us to serve one another, it's because it's good for me. Anybody who serves, they know that's the best thing that keeps them going. When you volunteer, I don't mean serve necessarily in the church. Go volunteer. Do Habitat for Humanity, soup kitchens, after-hour tutoring, work, see an orphanage. Like there's a million things you can do. Just do something for others. This will be really nourishing and fulfilling. And these are my few points real quick in a hurry.
Questions.
There's a couple more questions for everybody. All right, thank you all so much. Again, thank you for Jamie, Michelle, Sally, and Julie. This has been wonderful. And God be with you all. Really appreciate it. Let's pray, please. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Dear Heavenly Father, God, there's so much to thank you for. Father, I thank you that the pandemic came in 2020 as opposed to 1920. I thank you that quickly the scientists and the medical field were able to come up with vaccines and treatments and boosters. I thank you that the technology is not all bad, that it helped us become aware quickly and to know quickly that, maybe stay home, wear a mask, here's what you need to do. I thank you that when the enemy came with a very virulent, a very infectious virus, that you made it not too virulent, not too deadly or damaging. Father, help us to rest in you, to keep our eyes on you, to run to you and to each other, and to rely on you and on each other. Help us to appreciate the multifaceted benefits of the church, and to come and eat and to come and drink. Bless everybody who had any labor to do with this service, O Lord, here in front of the scenes or there behind the scenes or before in preparation. Restore the church, O Lord, and bring her back to be even more packed than ever and more healthy than ever, spiritually, psychologically, mentally, physically, and always. We ask you to please hear us through the intercession of Saint Mary and all you saints of Mother, so please, from the beginning of the mighty power of your love-giving cross, please, O Lord, make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And now the love of God the Father, grace only God, Son, our Lord, God and Savior Jesus Christ, the communion, the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace, the peace of the Lord be with you. We have some snacks in the fellowship hall. Help yourself.